2025 has been one of the best years for gaming in a long time. From official releases to fan projects, gamers have been eating well. If you're new here, hi, my name's Reece. I make variety gaming videos, from reactions to reviews and other essays, as well as actually playing games, of course. At the end of every year, I like to take the games I played in that year and turn them into a tier list, because tier lists are cool and fun. It's going to be a shorter list this time round. I spent most of my time this year playing the big PlayStation exclusives like Stranding and Ghost, so I'm going to try and go into a bit more depth with each game this time round. Last year's video kind of just amounted to me saying, this game is fun and I like it. I want to avoid that, but in doing so, this video might get a bit long. So grab a drink, get something to eat, and get comfortable. This is every game I played in 2025. Going in chronological order, I actually want to start with a game I forgot to put on my 2023 tier list way back when. Lethal Company was my first experience with the friend slop genre, and actually made for a great first impression. I don't play many indie games, a mistake I must rectify, I know. So on top of being a solid entry point into the PC co-op funny horror space, it was also a nice reprieve from the AAA scene, with its low poly visuals and unique gameplay loop and mechanics. The highlight, of course, is playing with your friends. I've spent maybe a couple hours in total, playing both solo and with randoms, but there's nothing quite like hopping into a game like Lethal Company or Phasmophobia with the boys.
Ryder.
Serving the company is the ambiance, the white noise, the thing you do in the background. The real fun comes from the utter shenanigans that ensue in the meantime. The game facilitates this really well, with plenty of opportunities for mischief, ringing the bell, switching off lights, or just screwing around over the radio. Just talking about it now makes me want to get some mates together and hop right back in. The game is a ton of fun overall. Nothing bad I can say about it. Good game, good vibes. Oh yeah. Hate it. Okay, time for 2025. I jumped around a bit at the start of the year, played through a little bit of Dying Light 1, gave Kingdom Come Deliverance another go, but the former I didn't play through properly until later in the year, and I dropped KCD for the second time because I still suck at the combat. Maybe one day it'll just click. All that being said, the first game I want to highlight for this year is Sonic Unleashed Recompiled, an unofficial PC port of Sonic Unleashed. If only I'd waited one more year. I've made it no secret that I'm not a big fan of Sonic Unleashed, with its biggest flaw in my eyes being that the first playthrough just isn't fun. It has its moments, sure, but they are few and far between, and are quickly snuffed out by a spike trap, pitfall, or other obstacle you just couldn't possibly predict or react to without prior knowledge of the level, which shouldn't be required to enjoy a video game. However, I've already talked about Unleashed's quality as a game, so I instead wanted to highlight the recompilation's quality as a port, and man, it's incredible. Setup is easy, just get your files and it's plug and play, no fuss. Before hopping into the game itself, you'll find a proper options menu with plenty of quality of life options like disabling the hint bubbles and Werehog battle theme, along with your standard options like resolution and frame rate. Get into the game proper and it only gets better with a solid 60 FPS at all times. This game is optimized really well. I only played up to Rooftop Run, but I didn't get a single noticeable frame drop. Even at 4K, this thing runs better than most official Sonic releases. And speaking of the resolution, the textures and visual effects look beautiful at 4K, and the graphical glitches you might be familiar with if you've ever emulated this game are nowhere to be seen. And that's it, no egregious art style changes or gameplay adjustments. It's Sonic Unleashed, less fuzzy, but otherwise exactly how you remember it. That's where the mod support comes in. Unleashed Recompiled supported Hedge Mod Manager right out of the gate, and on top of getting its own mod page, it was also made compatible with mods from the old Xbox 360 and PS3 page, a feat that even a year on, Sonic X Shadow Generations modders haven't quite cracked. But here it's available day one. That's not to bash those guys of course, but to highlight how this fan-made port ticked all the boxes from the get-go and hit the ground running. Everyone who worked on this, make sure it's on your CV. This is the gold standard of PC ports, fan-made or otherwise. These guys have set an example and made a product that is truly loved by all. Even as a certified Sonic Unleashed hater, I'm excited to eventually replay it in its entirety here. I know the levels now, so I get to experience the game in all its crisp, Werehog themeless glory. And with all that being said, for its defining quality as a port, Unleashed Recompiled is our first S rank tier. You know what I mean. Sticking with the blue blur for now, back in March, Sonic Colors Ultimate was made available for free on PS Plus, so of course I had to give it a go. My only prior experience with Colors was running through Planet Wisp in Generations and not liking it very much. But Colors itself, like Heroes before it, was a game I hadn't really seen any discourse on, positive or otherwise, so I went into it with an open mind. I think this being a Wii game originally meant they couldn't go quite as hard with the level design as Unleashed before or Generations after it. That being said, a lot of it is pretty solid. 3D sections are great across the board, being generally wider than Unleashed and offering some unique interactions like lining yourself up to fall on this rail if you're boosting. However, most of the game is in 2D and it's a bit more hit and miss in this regard. It's fine most of the time, but then these elevators show up and they completely break the pace. Tropical Resort is my favourite zone. Despite being quite basic as a starting zone should be, you're rarely forced to slow down and there's very little automation, both issues I had in later zones. The controls are generally fine. I don't have too much to say outside of very specific issues with certain mechanics. The double jump brings you to a complete stop if you're not holding in a direction. It feels very unnatural and often causes me to stop just shy of a platform I would have otherwise been able to reach. Thankfully they rectified this by Frontiers and Shadow Gens, with air drag slowing you down at a consistent rate in the air. The quick step returns from Unleashed and it's a lot worse here. The Wiimote lacked shoulder buttons, so the quick step was tied to the left stick in small sections of levels where it's the only movement you can perform. However, you still have to push forward to run, it's not automated, so I often didn't push the stick far enough, failing to register my input and running straight off a ledge or into an enemy. Boosting does propel you forward without stick input and would be the solution if there wasn't also a slight delay after each quick step before you can perform another one. They absolutely should have updated the control scheme here, but they didn't, and it's worse off for it. To quickly touch on the wisps, I only really enjoyed laser. Being able to use it at any time gives you free reign to create your own shortcuts, and the crystals make areas you usually blast through with springs that bit more engaging, since you actually have to aim. Spike and hover are shoddy versions of old abilities, and the rest just break the pace too much for me. Much like the rest of the series, Sonic Colors Ultimate has a banging soundtrack. I've since listened to the original OSTs, and other than Ultimate's Planet Wisp removing that melancholic piano, I quite like the remixes. Tropical Resort Act 1 is a highlight for me. I love the melody that plays during the chorus. It's a tasty tune in its own right, but it just works with the rest of the song to establish that feeling of setting out on a new adventure. A brilliant song to start the game on. Finally, I can't talk about Colors Ultimate without at least mentioning the bugs. It's in a better state than at launch, but it's still very buggy. Sound effects will play in the left or right channels at random, most noticeable when collecting rings, and it's always distracting. What's more egregious is that certain visual effects, like the big chaser's indicators, are completely missing, making survival in these sections complete RNG. To sum up my thoughts, the bugs, hit and miss level design and Stone Age control scheme bring Sonic Colors Ultimate down, but it's saved from being completely awful by the soundtrack, a brilliant first zone, and some unique gameplay mechanics. A middle of the road ranking for a middle of the road game. C tier. Moving on to Sonic Colors. Alright, I'll make this quick as I said everything I had to say on the game itself in the previous segment. That being said, playing through the original Sonic Colors through Dolphin Emulator was a treat. There may be graphical bugs at higher resolutions, not to mention gameplay bugs if you increase the frame rate beyond the original 30 FPS. However, I will take those minor setbacks if the result is a better art style, fixed audio, the lack of other significant gameplay glitches like the laser lights, and especially the ability to remap controls. The quick-step segments play so much better with the shoulder buttons. Sure, I might miss some of Ultimate's soundtrack, but the original OSTs are brilliant in their own right, with a lot of them being on par, if not better than the remixes. Ultimate was my first Sonic Colors experience, so I ranked it based on its quality as a complete package. Gameplay, controls, level design, all that. Therefore, while the original is a better overall experience, it's still the same game fundamentally, and I'm ranking it as such. C tier. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Death Stranding 2. I was excited to hop back into this world and see where these characters went next, and by the time I got the Platinum Trophy, I was emotionally satisfied. It's my pick for Game of the Year. That being said, I don't think it's quite as good as the first game. Isolation and reconnection are the thematic cores of Death Stranding 1, and they're expressed through Sam's personal journey, which is, in turn, informed by every aspect of the game. The setting, the gameplay mechanics, the fact you're alone trudging through the wasteland for hours on end before finally reaching a shelter and connecting it to this wider network of people. These all work to explore Sam's journey to reach out in spite of the walls he's built around himself. Others have explained this better than I can, but the idea is that every aspect of the game is thematically relevant. Death Stranding 2, on the other hand, is a bit more messy. Grief, loss, and healing are the central concepts this time around, but the game being structurally and mechanically identical to Death Stranding 1, where the themes were different, makes it a confusing experience. Around the halfway point, I started asking myself, why am I doing this? Because I couldn't see how delivering packages explored grief. The events of the story are just an excuse for another Death Stranding video game to happen. And that's fine, it at least makes sense to be doing these things from an in-universe perspective, and the gameplay is solid in its own right, but it's sad to see a franchise that I loved for its total cohesion lose that element. All that being said, yes, the gameplay is rock solid. Traversal has seen some fine-tuning, and you have a few more tools at your disposal, but it's pretty similar to the first game. Vehicles saw a similar treatment, with the bike controlling so much better than the first game. If you're at all familiar with Death Stranding 2 though, you'll know that when I say the gameplay is better, I'm talking about the combat. You have a plethora of new tools, weapons, and abilities to use, and enemy camps are designed to be engaged with. In DS1, the level design and your limited toolset encouraged you to treat enemy encounters like obstacles to avoid, much like you'd traverse a deep river or a steep cliff. I've heard some people say the first game is better in this regard, and I do agree to a certain extent, but I think DS2 encouraging you to take out the enemies instead of avoiding them shows Sam's physical progression. He's gone through this same song and dance before. He dealt with hostile people and BTs all across America, not to mention almost literally taking part in the world wars. Him being more capable as a fighter just makes sense. To briefly, and very vaguely to avoid spoilers, touch on the story, I enjoyed it. The first 10 hours were incredibly strong, reintroducing us to the world and characters nicely. Some of those scenes had me tearing up and smiling like an idiot at the same time. Everything after that gets a bit messy, with a lot of confusing plot elements piled on top of each other, along with side characters that honestly weren't given enough time or depth for me to care. Tarman was okay, Rainey had a whole chapter dedicated to her and she was barely introduced, and even the returning characters were weaker than they were in the first game, with Fragile and Sam being the only real exceptions to this. All that aside, I thought the story ended nicely, and as a whole it's certainly decent in its own right, and that's where I'm going to leave this. Death Stranding 2, a flawed game that, while overall a lesser experience than the first, is still great in its own right. A tier. I didn't play Peak for very long, maybe 1 or 2 sessions with my mates, but I enjoyed the time I spent on it. It's made by the people behind Content Warning, so it shares a lot of aspects like the fun, simplistic art style and the quirky character movement, which is actually the focus this time around. Like Content Warning, it's not really a game you play by yourself, the fun comes from playing with friends, working together to haul each other up the mountain, tossing backpacks and other items between each other. The game is a lot of fun. I'm not really sure why it doesn't have the staying power of something like a Lethal Company or Phasmophobia, but it's still a solid game and I can see myself coming back to it at some point. B tier. The new Skate game has been a long time coming. I'm more of a casual fan of these games. I played Skate 3 when I was younger, got into the older ones more recently, and overall preferred them for the grungy vibe, that sort of thing. But I played it, so I thought I'd at least give it a mention. It feels good to play, though I did notice I was missing rails more often than I ever did in 3, so I took a look at the settings. I wish it showed us exactly what these presets change, like an asterisk over the affected settings, or maybe put the old value next to the new one in brackets, I don't know. In terms of the map, I feel like a lot of the time I am just rolling down these long stretches of road for minutes at a time, just to get to the next hotspot. Maybe I haven't explored enough, but I feel like the old maps were way more dense. I remember constantly getting distracted with new spots and always stopping to look around when that white location text popped up. But hey, as a casual fan, it serves its purpose as a skateboarding game I can boot up on the PlayStation whenever I get the urge. B tier. Well, would you look at that? A couple nice, easy games to write a few small paragraphs about. What a nice change of pace. What's next? Oh dear. My first playthrough of Ghost of Tsushima was a long time coming. I got it and Death Stranding 1 for Christmas way back in 2023, but between YouTube, Twitch, and playing other games in my free time, I just never got around to it. Of course, with the sequel being announced late last year, it skipped ahead in the queue of my never-ending backlog. This game came at just the right time for me. After months spent playing Death Stranding 1 and 2, I needed a game like Ghost of Tsushima, a story that's far more easy to follow, paired with gameplay, mechanics, and an open world reminiscent of your typical action-adventure RPG. I wish I could say I was comparing it to other good games like the Horizon series or The Witcher 3 if I ever played that game. Unfortunately though, the comparison that kept springing to mind as I was playing was Assassin's fucking Creed. Ghost of Tsushima is incredible though. A deep and interesting story with a central cast of characters that, for the most part, have a lot of depth and interesting relationships to each other that are explored and expanded upon across the game. Like Death Stranding 1, the story informs the gameplay. Jin grapples with the concept of the ghost, torn between samurai honor and doing what it takes to save his island, and so does the player. In Chapter 1, when it was just Jin and Yuna against an army, I dabbled in both stealth and open combat, lacking the necessary tools in either playstyle to completely rely on one over the other. After saving Jin's uncle, I tried to fight honorably again, but found myself relying more and more on stealth as things ramped up and enemy encounters got tougher, before finally embracing the ghost when the story called for it in Chapter 3. Of course, you can mostly play however you like, but playing into the story's hands like I've done just elevates the experience. The gameplay itself is also incredible in its own right. Movement is maybe a little basic, but it's made up for with one of the best combat systems I've ever experienced, especially on lethal difficulty where you and your enemies can only take a couple hits. It's also satisfying. The open world is, as I mentioned, a by-the-books RPG world space. You've got your points of interest like hot springs that increase your health, haikus that award you with a cosmetic item, and most infamously, the innumerable fox dens. Not to mention the various settlements with shops and side quests to find, and the staple of any open world RPG, enemy camps. There's nothing particularly wrong with any of this, but it needed refinement. That's where the DLC comes in. Iki Island is Ghost of Tsushima at its very best. Not only does it have a story that rivals the base game, it also excels in the open world and the content within that space. Where Tsushima was littered with things to do that had little to no bearing on Jin as a character, Iki Island has a small amount of side content that all centers around Jin reflecting on himself and his family, playing the flute to soothe animals, and in the process reminiscing on his time with his mother, coming across old clan Sakai camps, and remembering his father's raid on the island, experiencing small flashbacks to events that eventually lead up to the day of his death. There's less content, but what is there is much more meaningful than 100 fox dens. Overall, I had an amazing time with Ghost of Tsushima and its DLC. I'd heard many good things in the years since its release, and finally playing it was cathartic. If I'd been on PlayStation at the time, it would have been my game of the year, no question. S tier. My opinion on Ghost of Yōtei is constantly flip-flopping. What I've decided for now is that Yōtei, like Death Stranding 2, is a decent game that doesn't quite live up to the standards set by its predecessor. For me, this is mainly due to the story. For one, I just found it hard to stay invested. Maybe I just don't vibe with revenge stories, but regardless, by the halfway point I was struggling to root for Atsu. On top of that, the story doesn't explore the concept of the ghost at all. Not in Jin Sakai's legacy, not in the fact that everyone just calls Atsu the Onryo, nothing. It's mostly just a name people call Atsu, only for her to dismiss it entirely. It makes moments like getting the Onryo mask and unlocking Ghost Stance fall flat when you know the character doesn't care about any of it. And more importantly, it makes me wonder why the game is an entry into the Ghost franchise in the first place. Gameplay is very similar to Tsushima. I don't have too much to say, but I did struggle with the combat much more here thanks to the new parry timing. Instead of the standard pull weapon back, swing forward and clear arc, enemies now enter a wind-up state, pulling the weapon back and holding that position as they approach you before initiating an often instantaneous attack animation. It's not an intuitive mechanic. Any gamer will be expecting the former, and they'll have to take a few hits before they can even begin to adapt. To top it off, enemies are generally more aggressive, and the way they swarm and pace across the screen often threw me off and got me killed since I was watching for that static pose instead of the long, sweeping animation. There's fun to be had, but Tsushima already perfected this system, and trying to do something different here has only made it worse. Moving on, the world is handled differently this time around. There's a large central region where the game starts, but to access each of the main arcs you'll need to travel through choke points into smaller regions, complete the isolated questline, then return to the centre, rinse and repeat until the game ends. It's an interesting concept, but it comes at a cost. You can head to each of the smaller zones from the moment you have access to the open world, so the whole game is designed around a starter build, plus the 1 or 2 new weapons you get in their respective areas. It's all designed fairly competently, don't get me wrong, but where, for example, enemy camps in Tsushima got larger and more complex the further north you went, here it doesn't, and it stops you from feeling like you're progressing as a player, since you know for a fact that whatever it is you're doing has to be beatable from the get-go. An interesting concept that needs refinement. The same can be said for the side characters, outside the ones with major roles in the main story. Each of the shopkeepers are unique characters that go through small arcs of their own throughout the game, having more dialogue nearly every time you see them, and even giving you the odd side quest. The only thing is, they show up in every region at the same time as Atsu and the other shopkeepers, and that makes the world feel tiny. With the way these characters are implemented here, I could take it or leave it, but it's once again an interesting idea. Refine it and you can have an excellent supporting cast. All in all, while I may be looking at some things like the story in entirely the wrong way, right now Ghost of Yōtei is a game that, despite expanding and improving on certain elements and exploring some interesting concepts, ultimately disappointed me as an entry into the Ghost franchise. However, I can acknowledge its quality as a video game outside that context, which is why it goes in C tier. Dying Light exists in a specific part of my brain, lumped in with Mirror's Edge as a first-person parkour game that went on to become a cult classic before getting a relatively mid-sequel. I have a lot of love for this game. I fondly remember seeing that first trailer and being blown away, especially as a kid who was exclusively an Xbox guy. Finally getting a zombie game to rival the likes of The Last of Us and DayZ, both inaccessible to me at the time, little me was beyond hyped. And in 2025, the game still holds up. The world is gritty, grounded, and designed to facilitate parkour while still being believable as a location that exists and is populated. The game being set at the start of an outbreak allows for a unique aesthetic and overall vibe that you don't get in your typical post-apocalypse. Empty homes are relatively undisturbed, other than the odd sign someone left in a hurry, like this oven that's still on. The populated safe zones and the people in them also contribute to this feeling. You can see that despite being prepared to hunker down for a little while, some people are still expecting the virus to end and for life to resume as normal. Of course we know that doesn't happen in the end, but it's a nice twist on the genre, and it's kind of sad that they'll never be able to do it again thanks to Dying Light 2 and The Beast being set so far in the future. One oddly specific thing I noticed about the world space is that looking out past the world border evokes a feeling of insignificance. The neighbouring cities with their towering skyscrapers are a reminder of what Haran has lost, especially as the sun sets and you see all the lights coming on. There's a nice juxtaposition at play there, the outside world carrying on as normal as the quarantine prepares for another night of horrors beyond comprehension. The story exists. The actual plot isn't all that special, though it isn't particularly bad. That said, I really liked a lot of the characters. Mostly the survivors from Brecken's Tower and the rest of the slums. Old Town gets a bit more wacky with its characters and side quests. However, even the worst interactions are saved by the stellar performance of Roger Craig Smith as Carl Crane. He really sells the serious man in a messed up situation vibe, and as a result it's very easy to immerse yourself, from tolerating idiosyncratic scientists to helping the tower's main technician prepare defenses. Carl's believability and intelligence puts you as the player right there with him. The gameplay is super solid. The animations, physics, and sound design work together to create a visceral and weighty combat system that perfectly balances realism and hardcore zombie-slaying mania. The parkour is also incredible, with player physics that, again, combine realism with an arcadey feel, along with short, snappy animations that give the player complete control over their actions. No flashy, drawn-out animations that kill your run here. And to top things off, I finally played the following DLC in this playthrough, and I've got to say, it lives up to its positive reputation. The story dabbles in mysticism with its cults and their idea of the cure, but it never becomes fantastical. You're still grounded in the experience. Along with this, the new map in the countryside rarely facilitates parkour, instead introducing the buggy as the main traversal tool, and they somehow made this work exceptionally well. It's so much pure fun that you never care about the lack of parkour. All in all, Techland captured lightning in a bottle with Dying Light 1. The base game is solid on its own, and the DLC, despite distancing itself from the concepts that made Dying Light unique, introduced new ones that gave it its own identity, for ending Carl Crane's story with a poignant moment that kept fans hooked for the better part of a decade. For its quality as a game, and all the good times it's given me over the years, it goes in S tier. I've played through Dying Light 2 twice now, once at launch on PS5 and most recently on PC with the latest version, and I've got to say, as much as it might be a hot take, I think I preferred my first playthrough. Mostly because the new versions have this visual glitch that never fails to make my blood boil. On launch, Dying Light 2 had a clear vision, a world that's relatively peaceful during the day as the infected hide in their dark zones, a slower, floatier parkour system, reduced volatile presence to encourage players to engage with the new night-only activities, and no guns. It was far from perfect, but the game was built around these concepts and they all meshed together quite nicely. After 3 years of updates, the game is unrecognisable. The infected are everywhere, all the time, and there's a wider variety of them, including these annoying spitter guys and these little green gremlins that make every other person explode in epic green gas. Not to mention these elemental guys, like, come on game, at least try to take yourself seriously. To make matters worse, virals, the runners that pop out and chase you if you make a loud noise, respond to melee attacks. I hate this. If I was using grenades or the newly added guns, I'd get it, but melee shouldn't be making nearly as much noise. That's the trade-off. Loud weapons do more damage but attract more enemies. Melee doesn't make noise but deals limited damage. It makes me wonder how anything gets done in this world when drop-kicking thin air brings the second coming of the outbreak. Volatiles now roam the map at night and hide with other infected during the day, compared to at launch where I believe they only spawn during chases. You can find them naturally in the world. They patrol both the streets and rooftops, which I believe was done for balancing since you'll spend 99% of your time on the roofs. Rooftop spawns definitely need toning down. You can't go 30 seconds without being detected. The idea is that you sneak around and if you're caught it's this desperate fight for survival, but in practice the chase is just the default state of being. That being said, no. I don't mind how frequently volatiles spawn. Their fatal flaw comes from the way they break certain quests. To give an example, early in the game, you can start a side quest about finding two kids. Their mother is worried sick. You're directed to a dark zone where the older brother comes rushing out in a panic. He had to abandon his little brother who's now trapped with the infected. At launch, while very risky, you could reach the younger brother during the day with the use of UV bars. Throw one down and make a break for it as the virals cower and scurry away from the deadly rays. Now, this quest is impossible during the day. Volatiles are simply too powerful for the low level you'll be at the time. So if you start this quest during the day, you'll be forced to go find a bed and wait until night, breaking any sense of tension because you expect me to believe he wasn't found and eaten in that time? Sure thing buddy, whatever you say. This happens a lot throughout both the main and side quests, and it's one of the many indicators that the game wasn't designed with these new mechanics in mind. Guns I don't have too much to say on, I kinda just mentioned them because multiple people involved in the questline that gets you guns call you Aiden Caldwell, despite Aiden himself not learning his last name until just before the epilogue, and he canonically leaves the city right after that, so how do you know my name, Jay? How? It's not a big deal, but it's a small part of the greater picture that leads into my main point with all this. These updates, despite ranging from good additions to features that should have been in the game on launch, don't mesh all that well with the original product, and as a result, the game now has a very confused identity, being this mishmash of a bunch of conflicting ideas. The only change that doesn't compromise too much and that I do wholeheartedly love is the new parkour system. It's honestly kind of unbelievable how they managed to completely rework the physics and player control without breaking the level design at all. The only gripe I have, I guess, is that the increased height from pole swinging makes these sequences look a little funny, but it's not a major issue. I think I'll be okay. Touching on the story before we wrap up, it's about as weak as narratives get. Too many moving parts, too many characters that we bounce between with very little screen time, time, and the choice system is the final nail in the coffin, sacrificing logic in the name of giving you choices, despite how nonsensical it may be to make or even have a choice in the moment. I like very specific elements of the story. Hakon and Aiden's relationship is interesting. I really like their dynamic throughout the story, and everything from the start of the central loop up to the end of the VNC Tower mission is Dying Light 2 at its strongest. Oh, the bloody Ties DLC, yeah, this sucks. The story is a whole lot of nothing. The Carnage Hall itself, being all about gameplay challenges, suffers from the core gameplay not being that good. And to add a very personal nitpick, having the DLC installed makes 99% of the ambient NPC dialogue about Carnage Hall. Forget Gerard, I'm sick of this guy.
2 more challenges and Carnage Hall is mine. Gerard.
To cap things off, Dying Light 2 is a very confused game. Techland's dedication to improving the game based on player feedback is admirable. The updates have ultimately detracted from what was, you know, an alright game. Top it all off with a weak narrative that sacrifices sound storytelling in the name of choice, and you have a product that is overall pretty bad. Any future playthroughs of mine will be on those older versions for their redeeming qualities, but as it stands, Dying Light 2, unfortunately, stumbles into E tier. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know it's quite wordy and I do apologise for that. I tried to give myself a 1-page word limit for each game, and while smaller games like Lethal Company and Peak didn't quite hit that limit, most of them had to be trimmed down to even meet it. The only one I didn't limit myself on was that last segment on Dying Light 2, but I had so much to say and I don't think many people share my opinions, so I wanted to make sure I got my points across. As I said at the top of the video, this year has been pretty good for games. Kingdom Come, Death Stranding and Ghost of Tsushima all getting sequels in the same year is kind of insane, not to mention smaller releases and fan works. We are truly a sports subculture. On the other hand, the channel has been more sparse than I would have liked this year. I said last year that I wanted to focus more on YouTube, and I just haven't lived up to that, have I? I'm going to do my absolute best to change that next year. I've got basically every game I'm going to play planned already, those being Dying Light the Beast, the Mega Man Star Force Legacy Collection, GTA 4, GTA 5, and GTA Online. A short list, I know, but in recent years I've started wanting to get as close to 100% completion as possible, outside of bullshit collectibles and other mundane tasks. I like to do all the side quests, find and complete all the locations, buy all the outfits, you know, stuff like that. That's why the list is so short. GTA games especially are quite dense, and it'll also be my first time properly hopping into GTA Online since all the way back in the Xbox 360 days. So I've got my work cut out for me. The Mega Man Star Force Collection is the only game or set of games that I'm not entirely sure I'll do a video on. I'm not like a Mega Man fan. I haven't played any of the other games. I'm only picking up the Star Force Collection because I remember very vaguely playing Star Force Dragon, I think it was, all the way back on the DS when I was very, very young. When I saw the trailer, I kind of pogged out and went, oh, I remember that one. But who knows, maybe when I play it, I'll find something to talk about, something I really care about and want to give my own perspective on. We'll see. I'm giving myself some leeway in that these videos don't necessarily have to be reviews, you know? Like, I don't think I'll have a whole lot to say on the gunplay of GTA 5, so I'll maybe focus on specific elements like the open world or specific characters or visuals. That being said, I do think Dying Light the Beast will get a full proper review, just because I'll be looking out for where it hopefully improves upon every aspect of Dying Light 2, so I'll want to touch on every aspect of Dying Light the Beast in comparison. But I'm excited to start this new chapter. I haven't been taking this whole YouTube thing as seriously as I probably should have been. So next year will serve as kind of a trial run to see if I can keep up the work ethic, properly planning videos with notes and deadlines and whatnot. Alright, I've yapped enough, so I will let you go now. Feel free to get chatting in the comments. Let me know what you think about my list here, or just yap about the games you've been playing. I'd love to hear all about it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a good rest of your year. Take care. Goodbye.